Welcome to Serving with Success, Meal Components and Quantities for Breakfast. In this module, you will learn the key meal components and quantities per grade group to meet the school breakfast program requirements for each grade group, the method of food-based menu planning, grade groups, overlaps, components, and quantities necessary for a reimbursable school breakfast. The meal pattern requirements for each grade group within all reimbursable meal service lines is the foundation of the federal school nutrition programs. Performance Standard 2 from the Administrative Review Manual states that a reimbursable meal must meet the meal pattern requirement as applicable to the grade group reviewed. A reimbursable meal is one that meets the USDA meal pattern requirements and is served to an eligible student and priced as an entire meal rather than based on individual items. Such a meal qualifies for reimbursement with federal funds to local education agencies participating in the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. All LEAs must ensure that every reimbursable meal service line meets the daily and weekly meal pattern requirements for the appropriate grade group served. This includes meeting the meal pattern requirements where LEAs serve multiple grade groups in a single location and where children are utilizing self-service stations. Schools now have a single menu planning approach, food-based menu planning. Meal components are to be offered according to grade and required portions. Schools must offer 3 components in correct portion size to all students daily to assure breakfast meals are meeting the grade group requirements for both daily and weekly portion sizes. The grade groups for food-based menu planning are kindergarten through 5th grade, 6th grade through 8th grade, and 9th grade through 12th grade. Food-based menu planning also identifies calorie, saturated fat, trans fat, and sodium standards for each of the grade groups receiving school meals. This is covered in detail in the Dietary Specifications and Nutrient Analysis module. Food-based menu planning offers flexibility in breakfast menu planning. Requirements for all 3 grade groups overlap for breakfast. A single menu can be used for all grade groups. The required food components for food-based menu planning for breakfast are 1 cup of fruit, 1 cup of milk, 1 ounce of grain, 1 ounce of meat. Meat alternate is optional. A vegetable serving is also optional. Fruits are a separate food component in the school nutrition program. Schools must offer students 1 cup of fruit daily or 5 cups weekly to grades K through 12. Schools may offer fruits that are fresh or frozen, canned in light syrup, water, or fruit juice. Pasteurized fruit juice or 100% full-strength fruit juice may be offered.
Keep in mind the fruit requirement for the school breakfast program, no more than half of your total fruit credit can come from fruit juice. So say you need the 5 cups per week, no more than 2.5 cups can come from fruit juice, and that fruit juice has to be 100% fruit juice.
Whole dried fruit or whole dried fruit pieces credit at twice the volume served. For example, 1/2 cup of raisins counts as 1 cup of fruit toward the fruit component requirement. Other fruit components are credited by volume as served. 1 cup equals 1 cup. Every student must take the fruit or vegetable component. Vegetables may be substituted for fruit, but the first 2 cups per week of any such substitution must be from the following vegetable subgroups: dark green, red, orange, legumes, beans and peas, or other vegetables, such as pasteurized full-strength vegetable juice. Any vegetable may be served as an extra food and not count toward the weekly fruit requirement as long as it fits within the weekly dietary specification. Students in grades K through 12 must be allowed to choose from at least 2 varieties of milk, even in alternate meal service locations.
Whether you're in kindergarten or whether you're a senior in high school, the requirement is the same, which is 1 cup per day, which equals 5 cups at the end of the week.
The choices of fluid milk include flavored or unflavored fat-free milk, low-fat or 1% unflavored milk, fat-free or low-fat lactose-reduced milk, and fat-free or low-fat lactose-free milk. The LEA must ensure any milk substitutions are allowable and that required documentation is on file. A list of alternative fluid milk substitutions is available on the MoDESI website. The daily and weekly requirements for grains for the 3 grade groups are as shown. The minimum grain servings indicate a grains component overlap. This is beneficial for schools which serve breakfast to all grades simultaneously in one meal count center. For grades K through 12, a minimum of 1 ounce of grains is required to be served daily. However, on most days a larger serving will be necessary in order to meet the weekly requirement of 7, 8, and 9 ounces. Once the daily minimum is met, a meat alternate may be substituted for grains to meet the weekly grain requirement. The grains offered must be whole grain rich. Foods that qualify as whole grain rich for the school meal programs are foods that contain 100% whole grains and/or flour and enriched meal and/or flour which is at least 50% whole grain. For the school meal programs, whole grain rich food products must contain 50% or more whole grains, and any remaining grains must be enriched. The ingredient labels of non-mixed whole grain products such as breads and cereals must list whole grains as their first and primary ingredient in the product. For items prepared by the school, the food recipe is used to determine whether the item is whole grain rich and meets the minimum requirements for a grain serving. There is no grain-based dessert limit at breakfast. Sugar is allowed in grain items such as cinnamon rolls, French toast, and similar items. Some grain products such as brownies, cake, and cookies are not allowable in breakfast and can only be served as desserts at lunch. All grain products must be credited based on ounce equivalent standards. A list of the whole grain-rich ounce equivalency requirements for school meal programs is available on the MoDESI website. The following grain bread credits can be used to calculate grain servings. 16 grams of whole grain, or 8 grams of whole grain and 8 grams of enriched meal and/or enriched flour are required to be considered whole grain rich. For example, calculate the number of servings of grains in a processed biscuit. Obtain the total weight of one item. Locate the product in its grains breads group. In this example, the biscuit is located in Group B. Compare the weight of one biscuit to the weight of a minimum USDA serving in Group B. Divide the weight of the biscuit, 57 grams, by the minimum serving weight, 28 grams, to find the number of USDA grains breads serving in the biscuit. The result is 2.04. This number is rounded down to 2 to determine there are 2 grain servings in this biscuit. In this example recipe, calculate the grain servings for muffin squares. We can calculate there are 1,914 grams of whole wheat flour in the recipe. Divide this by 16, which is the number of grams of whole wheat flour that equals a single grain serving. The result is 119.6 USDA servings of whole wheat flour in the recipe for 100 portions. Divide 119.6 servings by the 100 portions to equal 1.196 USDA servings per portion. Remember, 1/4 of a serving is the smallest amount that can be credited. Therefore, round this number down to 1 grains bread serving per portion. Schools may offer a meat alternate component at breakfast, even though it is not required by the school breakfast program meal pattern. Schools which offer a meat alternate at breakfast may either offer a meat alternate in addition to grains, provided that at least 1 ounce of grains is offered daily and can be counted to meet the daily grains requirement, or serve a meat alternate as an extra food and not count it toward the weekly grain requirement. The extra meat alternate must fit within the weekly dietary specification requirements. This will be covered in detail in the module on dietary specifications and nutrient analysis.
For example, say I have 1 ounce cereal and I'm serving that. Since I've already met my minimum for the day with grain, and I'm going to go ahead and use a sausage link, which is 1 ounce meat alternate equivalent. Since meat alternate is not required group for breakfast, that counts toward my grains, so I have 2 ounces altogether of grains for the breakfast program.
Meat alternates may be 1/2 cup or 4 ounces of soy or standard yogurt is creditable as 1 ounce equivalent. 2 tablespoons of nut or seed butters equals 1 ounce equivalent. 1 large egg is equal to 2 ounce equivalent. Cheese contributes ounce for ounce equivalent. Again, a meat alternate can be served and counted towards the grains requirement. After properly planning meals to meet the regulations, it is required that each food serving line meet the daily and weekly requirements to ensure that every student, from the first in line to the last, is able to choose a reimbursable meal every day in whatever serving line they select. Now that you've finished viewing meal components and quantities for breakfast, complete the following brief quiz.